You know that idea that saints are only born into rich families, in great European cathedrals, or in the midst of settings worthy of epic films. Well, it's high time you forgot all that. Today's story is about a poor girl of Palestinian origin who faced abandonment, persecution, and even a brutal assassination attempt from an early age, and yet she became a saint. That's right. Saint Miriam of Jesus Crucified, known as the Little Arab, proved that heaven is a place for people who don't give up, for those who suffer in silence, and for those who transform pain into powerful prayer. But wait, before you think that this is just another beautiful story of overcoming, I'm warning you. What you're going to discover here could turn a key in your mind and profoundly change the way you see the trials in your life. After all, who is this woman who was able to see the Trinity, talk to the Virgin Mary, and be called little nothing by herself, while the whole world was beginning to recognize the greatness hidden within her? And now tell me, after learning every detail about the life of Saint Miriam of Jesus Crucified, what excuse is still stopping you from taking the next step in your faith? Are the difficulties you face today really that big, or are they shaping you for something you can't yet see? How many times have you thought about giving up halfway, while God, up there, just expects you to do like Miriam? Stay strong, even when everything seems to be falling apart. This story isn't just meant to move you. It's an invitation for you to change your attitude from now on. Who knows? Maybe today you can start a new prayer routine, do a little fasting, or even seek more spiritual knowledge by reading the stories of other saints. Now, before you leave this video, do the following. Subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and leave a comment. Which part of St. Miriam's life impacted you the most? I really want to know. And if this content touched you in any way, share it with someone who needs a boost of faith today. From the earliest years of her life, St. Miriam's story seemed like one of those scripts that we watch and wonder, how can someone so small carry so much weight? Born into a simple Palestinian family, poverty was a constant presence in the home, but it was far from the most painful thing. What really broke her heart was the pain of loss. Just imagine, with each new child that her parents welcomed with joy, soon followed by tears, goodbyes, and more mourning. Of the 12 children they had, only Miriam and her brother Paolo survived a little longer. But even so, she lost her parents before she even turned 3 years old. A powerful scene that makes us reflect on how, even in pain, faith can flourish in a way that the world simply does not understand. Now think about it. How is it that a child, so young, without a father or a mother, being raised by a Muslim uncle, manages to keep the flame of the Catholic faith burning within her chest? It is almost impossible to believe, but little Miriam did exactly that. At the age of 8, she was already making her first communion, with her heart filled with a pure and true love for Jesus. She was a girl who fasted on Saturdays in honor of the Virgin Mary, who saw God in the little things of everyday life, in the song of the birds, in the sunlight in the morning, in the swaying of the trees in the wind. A real example that faith does not need perfect conditions to grow. It only needs a willing heart. And look how curious. While many children her age were learning to read, playing in the street, or dreaming about Christmas presents, Miriam was undergoing true spiritual training. Fasting, spontaneous prayers, and mystical experiences were already part of her routine. She knew that her story would not be like everyone else's. It almost seems that life was forging an invisible force in her, preparing the ground for everything that was yet to come. As if between the lines, God was whispering, "Hold on tight, because the trials will still increase, and a lot." When we talk about perseverance and faith, it is easy to think of small, everyday difficulties, a dirty look, someone's criticism, or even a lack of support in difficult times. But St. Miriam's story goes far beyond that. She faced persecution that surpassed any human limit of endurance. It all began when she, at just 12 years old, had the courage to say a resounding no to a forced marriage with a Muslim. This was in a social context where such a refusal was seen as a serious affront. Her uncle, completely upset, decided to turn his niece's life into a real battlefield. And with each passing day, the threats and humiliations only increased. But the most shocking moment of this phase in Miriam's life was the brutal assassination attempt. A former employee of the family, upon hearing the girl's firm decision to remain faithful to her faith, lost complete control. In a fit of rage, He slit her throat with a sword and left her for dead on a deserted street. And this is where one of the greatest miracles of her life comes in. While the world watched a lifeless girl, God was already writing a new chapter. Miriam had an impressive mystical experience. She saw the Holy Trinity, Saint Joseph, several saints, and even her parents next to the Virgin Mary. A scene that, just imagining it, gives anyone goosebumps. And the most incredible thing, she woke up in a cave, cared for by a mysterious woman in sky blue, who silently sewed her throat shut with her own hands. No doctors, no medicine, no hospitals, just faith and divine providence. For 30 days, Miriam remained there, being fed in an almost supernatural way. Each day, a mixture of pain, healing, and transformation took place within her. That woman, who seemed to come straight from heaven, took care of every detail with a tenderness that only the hands of God could inspire. And if you think that this experience made her want a quiet life after that, you can be sure what lay ahead was even more challenging. After everything she had been through, anyone would think that Miriam would seek a life of rest and security. But no, she chose to keep walking, with a determination that impresses even the bravest. As soon as she recovered from that miracle, she had to fend for herself in Alexandria, Egypt. Without school, without family support, and with her health still fragile, Miriam went to work as a maid. She was a typical young woman who took on the heaviest tasks without complaining, as if each sweep of the broom and each pan washed were a form of prayer. And do you know what's most curious? She preferred the homes where she was most despised, because she believed that suffering offered to God had greater value. While many in her place would have given up on religious life, Miriam went against the grain. At the age of 13, after a challenging journey to Jerusalem, she entered the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the exact place where Jesus was buried and resurrected. There, she made a perpetual vow of virginity, a commitment that, for any young woman of that age, would be practically unthinkable. But Miriam saw beyond that. She already knew that her mission was to surrender herself completely to Christ. And here's a powerful lesson. When we feel the inner calling, there is no point in running away. The heart simply does not rest until it says, yes. And if you think that from then on things became easy, not at all. She embarked on a true marathon of trials. She also tried to find her brother Paolo, faced long journeys to the desert, dealt with extreme fatigue, hunger, and the unknown at every new step. Along the way, she discovered how much she could trust in divine providence. And it is at this stage that we begin to realize how much Miriam's mystical experiences were like beacons illuminating the paths ahead. It was as if each challenge was a silent preparation for something even greater, something she had never imagined, but which was closer than she could have imagined. When Miriam accepted the invitation to go to France with her family, where she worked, she could hardly have imagined that she was about to experience the exact fulfillment of the prophecy made by Our Lady of the Grotto. In Marseille, she met the Sisters of St. Joseph of the Apparition, a congregation dedicated to caring for the sick and educating the poor. Even though her health was fragile and she barely spoke French, Miriam didn't think twice. She wanted to be part of it. Just imagine a young foreigner with so many limitations knocking on the door of a convent with a heart full of hope. And so, with simplicity and determination, she began her novitiate, taking on heavy tasks such as washing clothes, cooking and cleaning, all with that smile that was already her trademark. But her life was only just beginning to take on extraordinary contours. It was inside the convent that mystical phenomena began to appear that would shock everyone around her. It wasn't just one or two visions. It was the stigmata of the Passion of Christ that appeared on her body twice a week. The pain, the wounds, the visible suffering. And yet, Miriam remained incredibly humble, insisting that she was just a little nothing in God's hands, a detail that is worth reflecting on. While many people seek recognition for small actions, she, even with such visible supernatural manifestations, made a point of hiding, escaping the spotlight, and surrendering everything to God. And it doesn't stop there. In 1868, Miriam received one of the most mysterious and rare gifts in Christian spirituality, the transfiguration of the heart, a phenomenon that had already happened to great saints, such as St. Francis of Assisi and St. Teresa of Avila. When examining her body, doctors at the time were perplexed by the scar that crossed her heart from side to side. In addition, she began to manifest other charisms, such as bilocation, prophecies, and spiritual discernment, details that, at that time, only confirmed that her story was far from ordinary. And as much as it seemed like this would be the height of her mission, the truth is that God still had even more audacious plans in store for her. When it seemed that Miriam had already lived through everything a soul could endure and experience, a new calling came, a mission overseas. Even with her health failing, her body marked by stigmata, and her heart broken, she was sent to India in 1870 to help found a Carmel. Now, just imagine a physically fragile young woman crossing continents in a time without airplanes, without today's comforts, with only the inner certainty that she was fulfilling God's will. And there, in the middle of a country with a completely different culture, language, and climate, Miriam was an example of spiritual strength, hard work, and leadership, always with that simple manner, without making a fuss, but leaving a deep mark wherever she went. 2 years later, another mission, this time back to the Holy Land to found the Carmel of Bethlehem. Here, the story takes on even more moving contours. As she was the only one in the group who spoke Arabic, she became the link between the sisters and the local population. And don't think that she only prayed inside the convent. Miriam literally rolled up her sleeves, supervised construction of the monastery, and carried water, bricks, and everything else that was needed. A scene that seems like something out of a movie. A little nun, in the middle of a construction site, under a scorching sun, coordinating workers, and still finding time to console, advise, and pray with those who sought her out. A true example of faith in action. And as if that weren't enough, Miriam was also the protagonist of another episode that moves anyone who believes in the power of divine providence. When she decided to found Carmel of Nazareth, she went there, walked around the grounds, and, in a mystical experience, God revealed to her the exact place where Jesus had broken bread with the disciples of Emmaus. Without hesitation, she pointed and said, "It's here." Anyone who passes through Nazareth today and knows the Carmel, there may not even imagine the spiritual intensity behind that choice of land. And even with so much work, suffering, and dedication, what lay ahead would be the most difficult chapter of his entire journey. In the midst of this journey marked by miracles, visions, and tireless missionary work, the earthly end of St. Miriam's life arrived as intensely as the rest of her story. It was during a simple act, but full of meaning. While carrying water to the workers building the Carmel of Bethlehem, she climbed a tall ladder and fell. A fall that, at first glance, seemed like just another accident, but it triggered something much more serious. The impact of the fall ended up causing aggressive bone cancer, which advanced quickly and painfully. Even with all the physical pain, Miriam did not lose that sparkle in her eyes, that serene smile, and, above all, that unshakable faith that was already her trademark. It is impressive to think about how she faced suffering. While many, faced with terminal illness, would plunge into despair, Miriam chose to do exactly the opposite. She transformed pain into prayer, suffering into offering, and her last breaths into testimony of living faith. People who approached her cell to visit her left there shocked. Her joy was something that defied all human logic. To this day, scholars of spirituality look at this period of Miriam's life as a practical lesson in total surrender to God's will. If anyone wanted a real example of how to unite faith and resilience, just look at her. And it was on March 26, 1878, at just 32 years old, that St. Miriam of Jesus crucified departed for eternity. But, contrary to what one might expect, her story did not end there. On the contrary, she continued growing, crossing borders, inspiring thousands of people around the world. The canonization process officially began in 1927. Her beatification took place in 1983, and finally, in 2015, she was canonized by Pope Francis. Today, his liturgical feast is celebrated on August 26th, and his legacy of faith, courage, and deep devotion to the Holy Spirit remains alive and pulsating, like a silent invitation, or perhaps not so silent, for each one of us to reflect. And now, what to do with everything we have just learned?